Maor Applebaum.
And you're basically seen on your website with David Elfson from Megadeth now, and you've did a lot of work mastering lots of great people.
Yes.
How is it working with Yngwie Malmsteen?
Well, with every artist that I work, it's basically I get the music, I recorded the final mix, I do kind of enhancement or tweaking to make it sound the best, more pleasing, more powerful, more clear, more punch, more tightness, more warmth. Depends what the artist wants and what fits the music. Well, everybody wants the best, you know. I mean, if you go to a place and ask for service, of course, everybody expects you to give them what they pay for and what they want. I mean, you know, even if they pay for less, they expect always you give them the best you can. So the expectations are they give me the product to work on, and they expect me to make it better, and I do what they expect. So, you know, their demand is basically the same. If it's a smaller artist, a medium artist, or a big artist, they all have the same desires of having their music mastered and sounding the best they can.
So in that sense, it equals out. Everyone's equal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if it's a guitar player, he wants his guitar tracks to sound great in the mastering, even though mastering is on the whole overall sound. It's not like a mix where you can level up the guitars or level down. In mastering, you can do things that make the guitar sound good also, but it's an overall thing. So a guitar player will want that to sound good, where a vocalist will want his stuff to sound good, or a band will like their stuff to sound great. So basically they all want the same thing in general. They want to sound better, but each music style, each territory of like if it's Europe or inside Europe, different countries, or USA, each band or artist wants their sound to be enhanced in a way that it would fit a specific territory they want their music to be released in.
In ideas of compression and stuff, is there certain compressors that you use more than others?
Well, I have a lot of compressors and EQs. Some of them are tube compressors, tube EQs. Some of them are solid state, analog. Some are digital. It basically, there's, you know, depends what fits. Sometimes it will fit better having a tube compressor. Sometimes not. Sometimes a tube EQ would be good. Sometimes I'll use something else. There's no general thing. It just depends if it fits. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes more is less. Sometimes you do a lot of stuff that changes only a bit. Sometimes you do small stuff that change a lot. Sometimes you'll do a lot of stuff that changes a lot. And sometimes the opposite. Because it's an objective art and it's the final thing, you have a lot to work with in terms of you can use a lot of tools, but at the same time, you only have a stereo mix. You don't have the channels. You don't have the separate tracks. So you have a lot to work with, not on a lot. You have a lot of tools to use, not on a lot of things to work on in the track. So you're limited in what the track brings you, but you're not limited to the tools because you have a lot of tools to work with. But you're limited to only what you have, and still you have a lot of options to do.
As a mastering engineer, did you ever try out some stuff like Isotope and those companies that are online to help younger musicians that don't have the money?
Well, I work with hardware gear because I like working with it. I like the sound and I like the workflow, and I like what I get from it. It's something that it's kind of my orientation to it. I don't say plugins are bad or not. You know, there's some great plugins out there, and people can get great results. The problem is not if using a plugin or a hardware, it's who uses it. If you're the musician and you're mastering it by yourself, you're basically not mastering it. You're probably tweaking a mix or tweaking a recording, because mastering is being objective, being the person that is not part of the recording or not part of the mixing, someone who's fresh, unbiased, and objective, who listens to the tracks and from a different perspective, different gear, different ear, different room, different environment, different timing, different speakers. Everything is different, and that's why you can be objective and do stuff that changes the sound or improves the sound or do small changes that are needed to make it fit all other media. The problem is not the plug or the gear, it's who uses it. And if it's the guy who records and mixes it or the guy who mixes and masters it together, then you're not mastering, you're tweaking the mix. And a lot of times you'll make albums that are, or releases that are fatiguing, less depth. A lot of albums that are like that are hard to listen to even after one or two songs. Mm-hmm. But not through the whole album. Keeping the dynamics, keeping it fresh and interesting, keeping it musically developing. Those are things that only an objective ear can really put. And it's a difference when it's a mastering engineer than when it's not.
Compared to the, let's say, 1960s mastering to today's mastering, what do you think of, let's say, the Beatles remasters album? Do you think they stand the test of time with sound quality?
Sure. I think all the old mastering can still stand the test of time. If you have a great recording and great mixing, and you have great mastering, then it doesn't matter if it's low level or not, or if it's a bit louder. You know, those things that were made then are classics. First of all, they're great music. So great music stands out all the time and the test of time is always going great with them. They can pass it. Still till today, I can tell you that old albums, not like really old, but a lot of old albums from the 80s, from the 90s, they still sound really good. Even compared to today's albums, they sound really good. Mm-hmm. And if you DJ or do radio spots, you can hear it. When you put an old album, you can level it up, and it sounds good. But if you put a new album, it's quite hard to level it down. It's always up there. And as much as I do a lot of loud albums, I would prefer doing more dynamic albums, and I've done a lot of dynamic albums. I've done an album for Armored Saint that sounds really good, and it has a lot of dynamics, and it's not super loud. It's really good sounding. It's very warm sounding. And I've done other albums for other artists that are like that too. But at the same time, I've done also a lot of loud albums that sounds good. You know, you try to put the best tools that you can bring and the best perspective to make it sound good. Of course, if the artist wouldn't mind you doing an album that is not loud, it would sound even better. Mm-hmm. But when they want a loud album, that's a kind of a compensation, and you know, it's a compensating between volume and tone, and you compensate on that with that, and or compromising. Maybe that would be the right word to say. You compromise level, a tone for level, but sometimes you can do that.
Like today's music, let's say when you buy a brand new album, why is it so redlined? Like who invented that law to max it out in a sense?
Well, that actually came back in the 60s, when they were making vinyl, and they wanted a louder vinyl so it would have less noise on it, and also so it would stand out. But when it happened with CDs, they still made louder and louder recordings or masters. But nowadays, because the limit is so high, and you can make a CD that it sounds really loud, people started making louder and louder CDs, and they wanted their tracks to be loud so people won't have to turn up the volume knob, which I think it's best if you can turn up the volume knob, because then you can actually control how loud it is and how much you want it to push out.
Right.
You know, push out the air and be loud. But when it wasn't like that, you could just crank it up or lower down, whatever you want. Nowadays, when it's already on low level, it's still loud. But that's what the clients want sometimes, and a mastering engineer is a service provider, and then you have to work with your clients.
How did you start in this career of mastering? I'm sure you climbed up the ladder somewhere.
Oh, I started lots of years ago. I've done a lot of stuff in sound field. I was doing live sound, monitor engineering, backline technical directing, broadcasting, DJing, radio, what else? Recording, mixing, a lot of sound engineers. I liked mastering, and then I decided to focus on that. Well, if you do one thing and you do it a lot and you do it better and better all the time, you become really good at it. And if you just focus on that, you build your own clientele for that, and you build your market based on that, and you develop. I think that I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of work all around the sound engineering side, but once I decided to only focus on mastering, it made me better in it, and I improved all the time because I wasn't distracted by other forms of sound engineering. I wasn't running back and forth, and for a while I was doing also some of mixing too, and some of that, and some recording, but in time, as time went by and I was focusing more on mastering, it became more and more what I wanted to do and what I became better in. So I think it's like, you start with something that is big and has a lot of options, and then you narrow it down to what you really want to do. It's like with becoming a doctor. You can do a lot of stuff as a doctor, but then you want to be a specialist.
Mm-hmm. Like you have lots of projects, I'm sure, lined up for 2010. Do you have some you can mention?
Yeah, I have a few stuff lined up. Just by the way, I wanted to mention that I used to be a music journalist and a DJ at clubs and gigs and radio. So being a DJ or a music journalist gave me the option to listen to a lot of stuff that was released and be more objective and listen to stuff as a music journalist or a reviewer. So that gives me another benefit of listening to music in that kind of way. Regarding stuff that I worked, things that are lined up for 2010 that I've done, there's a lot of them, not all of them I can mention, but what I can mention is there's a new Cathedral album that I worked on. It's a cool album produced by Warren Riker. There's a new Cynic EP I worked on. It sounds really cool. There's a new album of a band called The New Revolution, produced by Ben Shigel. There's a new Marco Mendoza album, sounds great, fusion funk rock album. There's a new Tony McAlpine, Mark Bowles, and Virgil Donati album I worked on. Well, I need to remember a lot of things.
There's a lot of albums.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff I'm all the time working on. I just don't remember all the names right now, but there's a cool band I worked with last year called Richelieu. They're from Seattle. They're a really good progressive alternative band. There's a band called Schwarzenegger, which I recommend listening to. They're a very fun band to listen to, professional players, great music writing, compositions, and funny lyrics. It's all about Schwarzenegger movies. There's a few more bands that I right now can't remember. A band from Sweden called Man, which is Massive Audio Nerve. Great album mixed by Ulrich Wild that I mastered. A black metal band called Eyes of Nocturne that already had released their album that I've done. There's so many. I don't remember all of them now, but A lot of interesting stuff. I've done stuff for Rob Halford, for Lita Ford, for Lillian Axe, Yngwie Malmsteen. I did the Perpetual Flame album.
That's a great album.
Thank you. I really enjoyed working on that.
That album is it's going to be a classic. It's a really really good album. Yngwie Malmsteen's.
I agree with you. It's a really cool album. Great musicians, great music. It has a lot of the old school vibe. Reminded me a lot of the stuff that he was doing during the Rising Force first album, Marching Out, and Trilogy and Odyssey.
Right.
I hope people will listen to that album, and because it's a really cool one, and I'm proud of working on that. Also, the F5 album, The Reckoning, the album that I worked on, is a very cool album. I really recommend checking it out.
With David Ellefson.
Yes, David Ellefson's band. I did the second album, The Reckoning. It's really cool. And also, I did some Fight remasters that are really cool, and the latest Rob Halford album, the Christmas album. Yeah, Winter Songs. That's a great album. Sounds really cool. I'm very proud of that album, and I'm very proud to work on that. The latest Lita Ford album was also cool. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming in, and a lot of cool bands releasing very different stuff and very interesting. A very cool band to check is a French band called Treponempal. They did a great album. And another band from France is Jarel. Very interesting stuff. And also a band called Shade, and another band called Velocet and Royal Bubble Orchestra. Lots of cool, interesting bands from all over the world.
So you said you mastered Wicked Wonderland, Lita Ford.
Yes, I actually, that's the album I mastered.
That's an awesome album.
You heard it. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I did that album. I'll be happy to do more interviews if you need or want, and I'm very open to questions, and I do lectures about mastering and the music industry stuff, so feel free to call me again for an interview if you want.
Sure, and thank you again for introducing me to Skype. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great tool. I use it a lot.